Hi guys, my name is Borrodante, and welcome back to Overpain. So we keep jumping back and forth on the list of the submissions that I've got. In fact, we're actually going backwards for the last 3 episodes, including today. And today's patient is Nathan Seabolt. Cool name. The submission is from November 29th, 2017. Hi Boro, greetings from Sydney, Australia. Hi. I mean, how cool is that? Today it's Australia. Yesterday it was something else. I'm not drunk. I've been a long-time watcher of your videos and thought I'd see what you could do to help pump up the interest in this piece of mine from a long ongoing project. The character is basically a vampiric hag from Irish folklore. Oh, so she's a vampire. Cool. I had envisioned her surprising the viewer in this moment. Looking at it now, I think the lighting and drapery are probably the parts that need the most work. I know, the hardest parts. Don't forget about air perspective. A lot of stuff can be done with air perspective here. I'd love to see what you could do with this if you get the time. Thanks for the great videos. And thank you for the submission. Let's start. Pencil are recharged. 42%. That'll do. Best ever healthy chocolate chip cookies. Oh, hell yeah. Alright, so what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna go ahead and try to paint and talk at the same time a little bit. So the first thing I want to fix is an obvious problem with this rim effect of lighting on the character right here that is not justified. Like, we look at it and it looks weird. Like, I assume this part was kind of stretched to the fact that the edge of the hood would kind of catch the light that's going on right here, which I don't think really works out in a way that it kind of makes this part of the hood, like if we would be watching this character from the top, like this would be the hood, perfectly flat and not going backwards or anything, and there's the arm like this, you know what I mean? From the top. So basically there would be at least like the shadow from the nose like this, and most likely none of this area would actually catch the light from the main light source. So that's the first thing I want to remove. I want to just get rid of the lighting over there. And from all of this rim area as well, because, well, there's just nothing that would bring such a crazily bright rim lighting on this character at the moment, you know? And look, immediately, this was like obviously the main mistake. I removed this. Even without adding anything, this lady already looks much more convincing. So as I'm thinking that the light source is over here, somewhere, like further away, but close enough. This area would probably catch some light, why wouldn't it, right? So I'm basically like thinking with the light source, like I'm watching from that point of view and trying to figure out which parts of the surface this light source would actually be able to see, where we don't have any reason to cut it away into a shadow. So obviously all this area would probably catch some light. This would go darker, I assume. A good and convincing shadow from the hood on the character would really make this hood look a lot more three-dimensional. You see this shadow falling on the face like this, and we actually can like even make it stronger, so we would see the effect that the skin is in shadow but the eye keeps on glowing, so it looks pretty cool. Of course we have a lot more of that on this side of the face as well. No reason for the light on the bottom area of the palm. This thing would probably be in the shadow. And as I'm just doing this, you know, I'm removing all the areas where it felt like this was the only way to define the shape of the character at all, right? To add this lighting where it's not really supposed to be. So we kind of like imagine that there's some rim light that doesn't really support the rest of the picture, like it's obviously really dark in there. It would require a very cinematic kind of spotlight the way it goes in my face, but we can see a lot of bright background over there, so it looks justified that I have this bright light on the side of my face. In here, it's pitch black, so this area, it doesn't feel justified at all. So removing it, I actually defined the geometry, the shape of the character much better than it was, even though I'm literally removing details. Like, we now don't know what the shape of that hood looks like on the right side of the character. But it's not a disaster, is it? The character still looks fine, and it actually looks better because now we can imagine that the shape of this hood is actually normal, not too flat. Too bright at the bottom right here also. Yeah, there's such thing as reflected light from this surface, for instance, onto here. But even I think I will make this surface a bit brighter, but not too much. Like, the reflection of the light, like the effect of light bouncing from this surface onto here, you know? This is the cool, realistic thing you can do. Adding more light where it's not supposed to be getting directly from the light source, but from the secondary bounce. It looks very realistic and cool. But one thing one shouldn't forget to keep in mind is that the reflected light is also much darker than the main light. So if this area right here is not that bright, then the reflected light will be way darker than that. And right now, even after I darkened it quite a lot, it's still a bit brighter than the original plane right here. So I'm gonna make it even darker and only keep some of the light still caught from the main light source, like this and here as well, but the angle is pretty strong, so it's gonna be relatively dark anyway. So, different parts of the finger, different bones of it, phalanx? Anyway, when they're at the different angle, when the finger is bent, every next bone that has a different angle from the first one, it will always have a different brightness. There is no way you can paint this part of the finger with one brightness and then use the same brightness on the second part of the finger. It will always look flat and wrong, and that's like the main thing you can improve always, is to make sure that different angles are painted with different brightness. So in this case, I can see how the fingers are bent slightly, so the second bone of each finger is gonna be getting darker. Also, I think I'm gonna change the shape of this hand a little bit, but we'll get to it in a moment. Another thing about the picture that I think is there, but it's really hard to see it, I assume these barely noticeable contours are kind of black wings, right? And obviously they were added with quite a stretch, like it was hard to figure out how to visualize black wings on top of the black background in a dark lighting, so pretty much we just have a couple of highlights on the edges and that's it, which is actually pretty good, because one thing you can mess up in this situation is to try to bring the brightness of the well-lit black object to define it well enough and make it too bright in the end. Like, it's not gonna actually look black, it's gonna look weird. So in this case, it's really good that the wings actually look black, even though we can barely identify them because there's just not enough something, you know, details, shape visualized to figure out that these are the wings. If they are wings, what if I'm wrong? There's definitely a pretty solid statement on the fact how black these wings are, and that's good. When things are black, they should look black. No matter how much you think through the lighting or anything, keep the values of the surfaces respectfully with their actual color of the surface. Okay, I'm thinking let's actually work a little bit with this Elastify filter in Art Studio Pro to shape things up a little bit. And this is another thing I want to fix, is like the shape language of this character. So she's an old hag, she's a vampire, so I want to make the shapes a little bit more creepy, eerie, long, dripping, like the Scream mask, you know? I think the character's look would really benefit from adding this kind of shape to it. The back should be really messed up like this. Usually when it's a very messed up back of an old lady, it's gonna be quite high. the fingers may require some actual redrawing to make a different shape. We should really think on the way the character like this would position their fingers. Like, just think with yourself, you know, like she's like this. So we need this kind of hanging motion and fingers like this. This is like something I naturally do right now as I'm thinking with her character. So we need to create this motion of the shape. And this will really read well if we do this kind of stuff. So let's repeat that. Of course, it's not easy to draw hands at all kinds of custom positions and angles, but that's what references are for. Make a screenshot of this frame right now. So yeah, basically these are the ideas I'm having right now. I fixed some of the stuff and we're gonna work on this hand, on its shape message, shape language. Maybe also improve that kind of stuff with the face a little bit. But another important thing that we're gonna add in here obviously is the air perspective that I mentioned before. So let's actually use this color, slightly cool gray, and I'm gonna make it slightly transparent to see what the shape of the original was. Let's just copy it. So you see, instead of lighting up the character awkwardly from that rim light, that's really hard to justify in this pitch black situation, I'm gonna just add some of the air perspective like this to light up the shape. So I'm doing this, and also, let's think on the wings. We're gonna be doing the same thing with the wings. And what's good about this method right now, we add this air perspective to visualize the character with this eerie effect of the mist or something. We're adding the complementary color, like the lighting on this hag is kind of warm, greenish, and we're adding a very cold air perspective color, which will play rather well. Also, we're gonna add more red spots on the hood and on the arm, probably on the fingers even, to have this red-green situation over here and the blue-black in the back. So it's gonna kind of like play well. So anyway, the wings, I'm gonna just assume, no, not with these strokes, but more like with these, right? So something dark side. And I'll probably raise this wing right here this way. Right now I made everything really strong. It's not gonna stay this way. I'll probably make the air perspective between the wing and the shoulder very subtle because there's not a lot of distance. The less distance you have, the less contrast of that air perspective you can possibly fit into that space. So not as bright. You see I'm toning it down a bit. So yeah, basically that's what we're gonna be doing, just making all these strokes a bit more accurate and... Hi neighbors. Accurate and detailed. I don't know if you can hear my neighbors doing something with the wall behind me, but yeah, let's actually use everything I just said and search for good shapes. Like, we have all the elements of the equation on the canvas already. Now we can just push them around. We won't even need the color wheel or anything. Just push the colors we already have to a better shape. Or a brightness, slight changes of brightness. I think this should be a bit darker. And stuff like that. So yeah, right now, the shape of the wings, of the face, the color of blood adding everywhere, and the pose of the hand, the arm, that's what we're gonna be doing now, mostly. And this, obviously, again, is a different angle, so it's gonna get darker for sure. Oh, one more thing. In here, since the light obviously goes not perfectly from the side, but kind of like this, because of this, we need to make sure that this cylinder of the arm would be lit also not just perfectly from the side, but more like from the 3/4 angle. Like this. You see, as I added a darkening on this edge, it made the whole lighting turn around a little bit, and like we're lighting up this shoulder from the camera angle. And this makes things look a lot more three-dimensional when you make this kind of lighting more consistent. Since the face is lit more from the front, why would the rest of the body be lit from the side, you know? And when you make sure you make this detail of the lighting figured out correctly, when you have these darkenings at the very edge, it immediately looks a lot more three-dimensional and real. So yeah, this is all I had to say for now. Let's start. Okay, alright. I think I'm mostly done here. Did everything I was planning to do, shaped up the wings, the arm took a lot of the time, the biggest part of everything else I was doing, I think. And of course the values on the shoulders, like on this whole area, took quite some time. Paid a lot of attention to the values on the face and actually haven't noticed how it changed the way it looked a lot. You see, the render looks much more realistic, but really the only thing I did was the same thing I was talking about on this shoulder right here, that you have to pay attention where exactly the light source is and make only that spot the brightest and then go darker where it goes away. So I did the same thing on the nose. As you can see in the original, the very bottom tip of the nose is completely white, which makes no sense. It looks like it's a cardboard piece that was cut out and it doesn't bend away at the bottom, which is not the way the nose goes. So I actually bent it away. So now when we look at this, we can see this kind of movement on this nose just because of that. And I added the highlight. As you can see, the highlight is way over here. It's much higher than the tip of the nose. That's because the light source is higher, so the highlight would be not at the bottom side of the nose but closer to the top one, where the point where this tip of the nose starts facing upwards. That's where the highlight appears when the light source is at the top. Added a very important this triangle. This is something that always appears on the face in 99% of the cases when it's lit from the front and slightly at the side, the most popular kind of lighting on the face. You always get a little triangle of light catching up with the second cheek that is on the darker side of the face, and in here we didn't really have that, and it really felt like this part of the face is kind of missing. So yeah, just worked around on these values, just really thinking about where each part of the face is facing and adding highlights very accurately at the areas where the surface might be facing the light source. You see, only in these areas I have highlights. Same here. Only in these spots where there might be the surface actually facing this light source. And here as well a little bit. Nothing else. Never add any highlights in random areas where it just feels like adding them would be better to define details. Never sacrifice the proper geometry of the lighting to add some details that you don't know how else to add them. Usually the answer to how to add any kind of details is to think more detailed on the value. Like making something slightly brighter, then slightly darker, brighter, darker, and that's how you add details, not with the contours, the silhouettes, the bright lines of the highlights, but with the actual third dimension, adding more light or less light. That's how these wrinkles work right here. There's no silhouettes of these wrinkles, but they're definitely there. By the way, the drapery? Yeah, the drapery thing, what I improved is mostly the lighting again. Like the shadows on the shoulder right here, on the trapezius area, are too high contrast, so I just tone it down a bit to make it feel like a one consistent surface. And aside from actually just fixing the lighting, the values, what I added is this triangular pattern that you can add pretty much everywhere where you feel like you need to add some kind of, you know, relaxed cloth situation. So you need to add these wrinkles and you don't know how to figure them out. Always add this kind of pattern. I already mentioned it before, but pretty much every time I add some cool wrinkles, this is just this pattern, like adding wrinkles in this pattern, like the darker spots go in this chest order. In here, it kind of like also goes this way a little bit, you know, but it's not that important in this area because in here we have two shapes colliding together and they just dictate the direction of the wrinkles that we can add. So I just added some of the wrinkles right here to show that there are two shapes underneath this cloth pushing this cloth together in this area, and that's it. The only way that you make sure that it looks real is, again, paying attention to the values. It's always this thing. What I'm trying to say is these wrinkles look realistic because I really thought about this kind of shape And I rendered these wrinkles the same way I would render this big shoulder. So the same kind of brighter spot here, darker here and here. So on these wrinkles, I did the same thing, paying attention not to how to add some little dirt or the texture of this cloth or something like this. This is not the kind of detail we should be interested in. The real detail we should really pay attention to is the detail of the lighting. Like, we have some wrinkles somewhere, but we don't define them properly. Like these wrinkles right here, there's nothing wrong with them. Like, this is a very stretched and stressed out kind of position of the cloth, but it's a realistic position. Like, we can see how this elbow is really stretching everything towards this direction very strongly, right? So we have this tension on the cloth. It's a realistic tension, but the lighting of it is kind of weird. We understand that the shape should be like this, right? But in this case, the lighting should be like brighter on this side and darker on this side, because that's where the lighting is. So think about these wrinkles the same way you think about a bigger shoulder, and that's how you add really cool, impressive details that really work together with the rest of the painting, and not just make it more flat, you know? Most of the details right here were added with this kind of like approach of, you know, there's lighting on the character as a whole, but details are not taking part in it. Like, details are just some lines instead of being the same kind of shapes as the rest of the character is. The more you will keep thinking about every detail you add as much of a three-dimensional object as a big part of the character, the better your painting will be. So always think about everything as a 3D object, 3D detail. So yeah, one thing I would add in the end is probably a bit more dirt, because she's a bit too clean right now. I'll just add some spots like this and push them around. Also, I think the hood is kind of facing away a little bit right here, so it makes sense to make the values of it a bit darker. Same thing it does on the shoulder. There we go. As I'm adding this, it feels a lot more, like the light source feels a lot more local. So there's some kind of light spot going on right here, but in here there's already not enough light to keep it bright. So this feeling of going dark at the edge of the character, it really feels like a nighttime lighting, you know, it's really dark and only one spot is lighting her up. As I'm adding dirt spots, I make sure that I also think of them as a 3D objects, or texture on a 3D object, on a bigger, like the shoulder, the back side. So when I'm positioning these spots, I think about how this shape is, you know, this way. So the spot right here will have like this shape, but closer to the edge, it will start like squishing and more become closer to a line or something that repeats the direction of the edge of the surface that this spot is on. So yeah, I guess this is it. Really like the way the character turned out to be. I think it's really cool. Like, I barely changed anything, but the lighting and that shape language of the hood and the arm really turned out cool. In here, it really felt like the hand was kind of like struggled into the composition by the author. Really, for this kind of situation, just use references if you want to make sure that your hands mean something. Because hands are the second thing after the face that shows what the character is about. Like, maybe this old lady is not really capable to express herself, her mood with her posture because of her problems with the back and everything, but the hand really should show this thing, you know, so pay attention to it to make sure it looks just right. One little tip about drawing hands realistically: always remember that the first bone is actually only halfway free, and then it's pretty much the way the reptiles have it. It has this triangle of a skin connecting two fingers together. Like, literally every time you see a hand, the half of the first bone will be connected with this skin right here. And when you pay attention to it, when you bend the fingers, you stretch this skin around, especially on a creepy character like this. It really pays off well. Like, the hands look a lot more realistic than they could be. So yeah, this is it. In the end, I could actually move the composition a bit upwards to have a little space from the bottom of this hand to the edge of the canvas. Let's actually go ahead and do that, actually. Oh yeah, by the way, the top of the wings kinda has feather, and the bottom is a leathery bat kinda wings. Well, I don't care. I like it. Let's imagine there's not feather at the top, but some kind of spikes. I don't know. It doesn't matter. In any case, it looks pretty awesome. Tell me, guys, what you think about the result. Ask me questions if something is not clear enough. If you want your own artwork to be overpainted like this by me, the link to my Patreon page is in the end of this video. And I thank you for watching if you did. I guess you did if you're here. Leave a like and subscribe. Tell a friend. Do whatever you want. And I will see you in the next one. Bye. I wonder what this hood plus shoulders piece of clothing is called. Not really a thing in the 21st century, but I kinda want one.